You unlock this benefit with the key of Patreon. Beyond is another dimension. A dimension of thought. A dimension of speculation. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both waffle and substance. Of things and ideas. You've just crossed into the podcast zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. It's Julian and I taking on an episode of the Twilight Zone, episode by episode, to this classic series. And we are 100 yards over the rim into season 2. So I'm going to give I think, the last couple of episodes, we keep doing this, we give initial thoughts. So I'm going to give a bit of a plot summary quickly first. This is 1847. A small caravan of covered wagons are making their way across the sort of Midwest desert. And they're in deep trouble. They are short on water, short on food, and the son of one of them is suffering from some illness. To find possible way to go, the leader of the sort of caravan goes to look over the dune, over the rim, and just goes 100 yards over that rim to find himself in 1961 New Mexico and in a diner. And having traveled forward in time, he meets the owners of the diner, has a conversation, and comes across things like penicillin, this idea of the history that is held against these ideas, these Western traveling pioneers, and all this other stuff. And eventually, he returns with the penicillin to sort of carry on his quest to the West. So, initial thoughts then, Julian. What did you think of 100 yards over the rim?
This isn't one of my sort of shortlisted favorite episodes. But it is a classic episode in a lot of ways, and it sticks with me. I really like it. I don't love it, but I really like it, and it has a lot of staying power. And I love we've seen this in a lot of other Twilight Zone episodes, the sort of lack of explanation for the time slip.
Yes.
Just let it happen, and I think there's something wonderful and magical about. It's New Mexico, by the way, but, sort of like I could just wander over that rim and see anything, right? And maybe those ideas really spoke to me, not only as an American, but also like when I was a kid, it was like, what's hiding in the woods? Are we going to see a body? Or maybe I totally would have bought, we could go back in time at any moment.
I love time slip episodes. I really do. I think there's a real sort of, it's one of those sort of supernatural phenomena, whether it's true or not, whether I believe it or not, is irrelevant. But I just love it as an idea. This idea of getting a glimpse of a different time, past or future, is so good. And I think we've seen it in some of the other episodes. We have seen it sort of done before. But this one sort of felt... This one sort of had like a direct purpose. Like fate. This one felt more like fate intervening to direct history more than the others, which was interesting to me. Which I kind of enjoyed. But I actually kind of like the main character. I just wanted to call out. It's Cliff Robertson, who I'm sure it seems like he's done quite a few things. Oh, he was. I've just spotted who he was. I've just gone in. Well, first off, he was the president in Escape from LA. But he also plays Uncle Ben in the Spider-Man films, the Sam Raimi films. So he's been around. I think that's the main characters. But yeah, I really like this idea, and this idea of sort of like leading these sets of wagons. And I like the fact that they are like the last few. Like there's 3 left, and it's like, well, 3 have gone back. One of them was taken out by attacks from sort of natives. And I like that it's this desperate. This is that last desperate thing, like they are literally on the verge of death. Like they're out of water, they're sort of low on food. I don't know. It has this sort of like you said. There's no explanation, but there is some supernatural force that just allows them to go forward that little bit, to push on, with hope. And we'll get to that in a minute as to why. But I thought there was something nice with this episode in that way.
Yeah, and I like as you say, the focus on the son and the fact that this is all for a purpose, right? I mean, his son has had fever for 11 days. He's obviously going to die. And Chris is able to bring, penicillin back. So yeah, I mean, I like that stuff, and I do. There's this bit about how he, of course, it's a little convenient, but he finds an encyclopedia with a brief entry for his son, who has died in 1910, presumably at a decent age, and he realizes, he's in, as we talk about time travel, a deterministic universe in which, right, I've got to go back and there is this sort of sense of sacrifice. I mean, not to focus too much on the ending, but the sense of sacrifice of our parents, of our ancestors, and the sense of how the West was built and a parent's sacrifice for his son. Because he doesn't find an entry for himself, right?
No.
He finds an entry for his son and wants better things for his son.
But it's important as well to find out what his son's entry is. Like, his son becomes a doctor and did advanced work in childhood illnesses. And so it's this idea of, like, his son not only did better, his son actually has an impact on history. And like you say, he is just I mean, this off the back of the last episode, like we've literally just talked about. In the last episode, we talked about for Long Distance Call, this idea of generations sort of clinging on to the younger generation. This is almost like the opposite. This is that, right, I'm happy to sacrifice myself to allow that future to happen. And so it's an interesting contrast. But yeah, like there's a pride that he sees when he finds that entry. But yeah, before you get all that, then you get some of the usual, let's say, fish out of water moments. Not, they don't really play it for comedy, but there's bits like him jumping up and down on the tarmac road, the truck almost running him over, and a couple of moments like that. So it works in those cliches as well. Whether they're good or bad is different, but it works in those cliches as well.
Yeah, I could have used more of those. There is this, he sort of sees the truck as like, it's a monster, and you think, well, you have some connection. You're in a wagon train, right? You know what this is. It's not like, I mean, I fully could believe that dogs look at trucks and say, that's a giant animal made of metal. But I'm not sure that a human would do that. That's clearly a conveyance of some kind, driving on a road. And it could have had more of that for me. But I think for me, while this isn't a great episode, what sticks with me and what lives in my mind is him coming over the ridge and seeing the telephone lines and seeing the road and then seeing this, little cafe. And the other thing is the affluence of that cafe, which by today's standards seems, obviously it's in the middle of New Mexico, surrounded by desert. It's not a big place. And yet to somebody of 100 years ago, that is the most wealthy space imaginable. It's clean. It's got these, fancy countertops. And I often think the same thing of, when people get too down on our current situation, imagine humans of 100 years ago seeing us. They think your houses are enormous. You can just order this stuff on Amazon and it's delivered. Like your life is so up. Your quality of your food is so much better. Like we had to fish sawdust out of our steak, and that was at a good restaurant. So I dig all that.
No, it's true. I do like that. And there's sort of the usual sort of bits and pieces with the sort of but I like the fact he won't let go of his connection to the past. Like his rifle, this rifle becomes this symbol of the past as well, because they're like, it's a flintlock rifle, and it only existed sort of. It looks brand new, but it's clearly sort of like over 100 years old and all this other stuff. And I like sort of how they use that as this sort of point of reference for time, which we'll talk about in a moment. One of the things you talked about, deterministic universe. There's a dropped line in this when he talks to the cafe owner and the cafe owner's wife, the sort of the couple that run this place, and they are very much sort of like, it's sort of it's not great there. This was just a dream that we had. This is an idea we had. We sort of moved out here, it does. It's not, you say, it's sort of, it seems affluent, but like even they make it clear that it's not really doing great business. There's another highway that's sort of taking things away from them a little bit. It seems on its outs. And so there was a part of me that was wondering, because I thought about this idea of the deterministic universe, because he finds the penicillin, he finds this entry about his son, which is what obviously drives him back. But I mean, he could have gone anywhere, but him going over that ridge happened in 1847. So that cafe had to be there. Those people had to be there. And so there was a part of me that was sort of like, well, were they put there as part of this fate? Did their life journey, was that intervened with as well to ensure that they were there at that point to have this interaction, to ensure that this happened, so that this young boy could become this doctor and move on? Like I don't know. It felt like you said there's this whole thing of like what things had to be in place in order for this to happen, and so is there a greater force intervening on this?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would say at least it's believable that would be there, right?
Yeah.
I don't see that hand of divine providence, in this episode. Although obviously, I do see exactly what you're saying. But I think your point gets at the way in which we see protagonists and we see ourselves. And I'm thinking of how, I'm always aghast at the idea of people like praying for their sports team to win or praying for rain, right? Where we have this idea like, right, somebody drowned in the river, but I'm so glad that you got the rain you wanted, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You do realize like, 100,000 people were affected by this rain. You think God was listening to your prayers, but that makes sense to us in our mammalian brains because we're narcissists fundamentally. And scripts, plots, stories tend to be narcissistic in the sense that they're about, Iron Man, even if he's a dick. They're about, Chris Horn. It's about saving his kid. And so, right, it does sort of invite the sense of like, right, fate or God or whatever put these people there. Their lives are miserable. Not really, but their business is going to fail. Their lives have been affected negatively. But yeah, thank God they were there to get penicillin to this dude.
Yeah, yes, that's what you say. Like it all sort of a series of coincidences. But yeah, I don't know. This is the thing with that deterministic nature. Like things have to happen in a certain way, sort of. Especially if you're going forwards. That thing of going backwards seems more. A time slip backwards sometimes sort of, for me at least, seems to make more sense because what's happened. Those things have already happened, so you're able to sort of slot into those things to then say, oh well, me being here triggered something for the future. But to go forwards in time to trigger something, to ensure something happening in the past, it's like a layer of complexity that sort of like, I was like, oh cool, all these other little parts had to be in place, but it still works. It still works. It's still fine. But in fact, I like that level of complexity. But it does make me ask that question. I'd say that thing because it's never explained why this happened, but it does. I like the idea of it. But
at least it's believable that there is, this dumb little cafe there, right? I mean, it's not like we're asked to believe some sort of bizarre, paradox. There's no real. It's not like the cafe owners are like, oh, you mean Christian Horn, MD? He saved my ancestor, right?
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yes, it's not. And again, I should say he doesn't just go over the. To be fair as well, he doesn't just go over the rim of this sort of sand dune and there's the cafe. Like he travels a good couple of miles down the road to find it. So it is sort of like it's not just there. So there is that element of like it's not that fortuitous. And I suppose going back to the one I compare it to, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one with the biplane landing in 1960s, in 1960 on the air base, and then him learning that him dying in the dogfight in the past is what saves this guy that becomes this sort of this air general and whatever. So it has us. That makes more sense because, of course, he would find an airbase to land at and stuff like that. And this, but I suppose he does come across this diner, like he's followed that road somewhere. So I'll accept that. Yeah, it's not that fortuitous, but yeah, it works. But it's still good. And I actually, like I said, the thing I like the interactions. What did you think of this thing? I want to come sort of towards the end. This thing of like he runs off, he's found the penicillin, he does the runner, and he obviously goes back and he drops his rifle. But then when Joe picks up the rifle, it is now aged 100 years, and it's obviously decayed and it sort of comes apart in his hands pretty much. What were your thoughts about that? Was there any thoughts?
I'm okay with it. I mean, you sort of have to believe that while we never see a portal, although he drops the rifle as he's being pursued, somehow that was in the past, right? For it to then age 100 years. But, of the quibbles that I have with this episode, and there are only a few, that's not one that really bothered me. Did that bug you?
No, quite the opposite, actually. I kind of liked it for that. The reason you've just said is it showed that there's sort of like something. It's not seen, but there is something on that sand dune that's sort of like a transition period. At one point, that rifle existed in both the past and the present, almost at the same moment, to then be covered by sand in 1847, to be then sort of refound in 1961. So I actually kind of like it as like I said, he's been hanging on to it. It's been this, the state of this rifle has been this indicator of sort of like the strange, of the weird. That like, it's old, but it clearly it's been made within the last sort of like couple of years, to then be, over 100 years old and be rusted and decayed and sort of come apart in its hands. I really like that as a touch of the weird, actually, to be like, oh no, this thing exists at one point. This thing existed in the same spot at the same moment in both the past and the future, and and it wasn't there before. Like, or was it? Like, it must have been on that sand dune at that time when he came down the sand dune and stuff. Like
right.
It's all So I like.
He just didn't go back for it, right?
Yeah. So I kind of love when he arrived. So that at one point that rifle exists. Two versions of that rifle exist in 1960. Because you're saying it's a deterministic universe,
right, yeah.
So it was already on that sand dune.
Yeah, but we don't know how that portal works, right? Or because obviously the pursuers would go over the ridge to look, and suddenly he's gone, right? And we don't see that.
Yeah.
But they're not whisked back to the past. So there's some sort of ambiguity there. What I really like about the dropping of the gun, though, is not the way it becomes a sort of representation for, this guy really was from the past at the end. What I really like is that he has protected the gun. It's not just that it's an antique or not. It becomes a symbol for, is this guy really from the past? But it's the way he protected. In fact, he sort of strikes out. He's ready to defend that gun with lethal force against these people. And because of that, I love seeing him run away, and then he drops the gun, and he also drops the penicillin in a little plastic bottle, right? That's familiar to us. And he reaches for the penicillin. And I love that. And he leaves the gun that he's been protecting and picks up the penicillin and keeps running. And I love that. To me, that's a metaphor of choosing life over death, right?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
My son's life is what really matters here. I've been taught to hold on to my gun at all costs. I've been willing to kill to defend it. But now at this moment when I don't have to think about what I'm doing, where it really comes down to grabbing something and run, I choose life and choose my son's life. And I love that.
Yes. Well, it's that thing of like choosing how to survive, isn't it? And again, like you say, choosing life over death. Like he's choosing, this is what I can take back. I'm being given even more than that. Like he has been shown that his son will survive. Like we have seen that. And he is making that choice that like, right, I know my son survives, and so this penicillin is the thing that will do it, regardless of what happens to almost anybody else. Like that's the important thing. I will make sure my son survives, and so he makes that choice for his son, which I think is really cool. So I agree. So yeah, this episode has got some really good touch point moments, and actually works as a whole. Like I kind of like it. Like I did enjoy this episode. Like you say, it stands out. I can see why this would be a classic for some people. Like why this would be held up as a good one, because it's simple. yet it has some real clout to it at times.
Yeah, I agree.
Any final thoughts?
It's a minor quibble, but I don't think he's heard the term highways, and he mentions highways when he comes back, as if like the wagon train is going to know that. But yeah, I feel the same way about this episode. It's not a fantastic episode, but it does have these memorable sort of classic elements.
It does, yeah. It works well. I'd potentially go back and watch this one again. I think it's a good one to watch. Final thought, just for me, it has one of those other things as well. Early actors in early roles. John Astin is on the wagon train. Of course, I will know him less than 3 years later. I think 3 or 4 years later after this, as Gomez Adams. From the 60s version of the Addams Family. And so to see him now is just like, oh yeah, it's just every now and then this keeps happening. There's a sort of like, not just the main characters, but side characters. We've had Don Rickles, we've had all these people that sort of keep just popping up, and I'm like, oh, I know it'll happen again in a couple of episodes. But yes, I kind of like this. But any final thoughts? I like this episode. I thought it was good. I think it sort of touches on some very good points. And I kind of like the idea of time slips as well. Any final thoughts, Julian, before we sign out?
The last thing I'll say is that this way that it ends with how we built that, there's that line, that is so ingrained in America, right? And it's also so white. It's so, there is this talk about the Indians, right? I mean, obviously we're being shown a sort of pro-manifest destiny idea. And this came at a great price, to the ecology as well. But this idea of sort of the debt that we owe to our ancestors in this country, in not living memory, but not that long ago, right? It's not like, Shetland was settled, 150 years ago by some people who died in huge numbers, No,
yeah, it's a good point. It's a really good point. It is a good line. It ends on that hopeful note, doesn't it? It's trying to sort of show again that sort of that pioneer spirit and the hope, which I think this tries to be a very hopeful episode. But yes, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you very much for your support. I'm hoping you're enjoying our trek through the Twilight Zone. And as of now, we shall see you on the next episode.